Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about solar recycling those solar modules, and we have some experts here that are ready to recycle your PV. We have Livia Keene and we have Joanne Brasch. So welcome to the show, Livia and Joanne.
Thank you for having us.
And then also we want to mention too what organization you're with, and that is the California Product Stewardship Council. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
I got all that right. So what do we do with all these solar modules? We've been really successful in the solar industry. We've installed a whole bunch of solar, and then at some point, some of these modules are going to break or they're going to need to be recycled or reused. What should people do?
Well, we would love to see people find more creative solutions for their solar panels and really utilize solar panel reuse and recycling over landfill. We have found in our ongoing projects that most solar panels are removed at 9.1 years, which is
Wow,
really early. Yeah.
that's
And they have
crazy.
so much life left in
What
them.
are they doing that for?
A lot of them are being replaced with newer models that are more efficient, work more quickly. And so these panels that still have so much life left in them are often ending up in landfill when they could be placed on new homes, refurbished, or recycled properly.
That's amazing. I had no idea 9 years. And let me just tell people out there, don't do that. Keep them going. If they're already installed and they're working and just the efficiency goes up 2% in the last 9 years or whatever it is, just put the new solar somewhere else. It still makes the nice sine waves. It's only a couple percent difference. Like, don't waste your money. That's kind of what I think.
It's an average. So we see a lot of older panels. We've seen some that are like from the 70s that are hexagon shaped.
That's
We've
cool.
seen a couple instances where people buy houses and then just part of replacing the roof, they just upgrade the system. We also see whole system upgrades for installation of battery packs and battery storage. So even though it's an average, the reasons for the working panels to enter these local government waste programs is also because if one or two break, it's more efficient to upgrade the whole system. So for our pilot projects, we take in unwanted panels, we separate the ones that are usable from the ones that are destined for recycling. And oftentimes within an array, one or two might be broken and the rest still have generating capacity.
Yeah, sure. And let me kind of say something else too, because we're in California and we're talking about California right now. And there's net metering one, or they didn't call it one because it was just called net metering two, where they kind of made it more mandatory to have time of use, and net metering three, where you don't get much for exporting. So if somebody has a perfectly good 9-year-old net metering one project, they're getting full credit for exporting. And even if they get twice the efficiency, which they're never going to get, you're not going to get twice the efficiency of what you had 9 years ago. But let's just say that they did, or they doubled the size of the system. All of a sudden, you're going to this worse net metering policy. You're throwing away money. You're going to have your electric bill probably go up because you're changing that net metering policy. So I know that I'm kind of talking about not about recycling or reusing, but like just keep on using it. And if then you can take that extra money that you would have spent on a brand new system and put another system somewhere else, invest in a solar company, give it to a nonprofit like your organization or NorCal Solar or something like that, ACES, American Solar Energy Society. There's plenty of places that can use that money that you would be spending on a brand new system, and you'll still be doing better financially if you're not just taking it off. And of course, when I'm talking about these net metering policies, that's for distributed generation where we're talking about solar on buildings and things like that. So it's different for utility scale. So I don't know. Sorry to take away all of that recycling business and trying to just talk people into like, keep on using it.
There's always a lot of policies that will influence adoption and materials entering the program. There's also a lot of policies preventing recycling.
Hmm.
California doesn't have the best solar panel recycling program. Actually, we don't have a program. And some of the
Hmm.
regulations for recycling are actually inhibiting some of our recyclers from truly capturing the critical material. So, at one point in our interview, we'll talk more about policy, but Livia can tell you a little bit more about what we've used some grant funds to create a map where anyone in California and beyond can use our map to find recyclers or reuse partners. Livia, you want to tell more?
Awesome.
Yeah, so we were previously awarded phase one from the Department of Energy REX before recycling grant. And we've been using some of those funds to create a solar map. So we've reached out to solar panel installers and reuse organizations. We're always collecting more. Please feel free to share that information far and wide so that people have one easy location to find solar panel installers who are engaging in reuse organizations, recyclers who will take their old panels that are no longer in working condition in one central location. So you can search by your city, by your state, or by the type of organization that you're interested in finding. And we're really working through that map to help create and install that circular economy so that instead of panels being pulled off and sent to landfill or directly to the recycler, there are other avenues that people can look into as well.
So where do people find that?
That's on our website. We're happy to share those links. It's calpsc.org/CPSC dash solar stewardship. And you can find all kinds of helpful links, including our solar map.
And you said other states too, I guess?
Yeah, so other states, we've worked with partners in Arizona, especially who are engaging in large scale solar reuse. And so we've included those businesses too. Our map is really just getting started. We applied for phase two of the REX prize and we're looking to expand, but we want to include other states in our map because while California is a mighty state and we have a lot of panels for reuse, there are so many other places that are interested and are already engaging. And we want to make sure they're included as well.
So that's REX Prize. I guess that would be Renewable X Prize or Recycling X Prize or
It's REX before recycling. So it's other avenues before recycling. So refurbishing, reusing, repairing, remanufacturing, or repurposing. It's encouraging people to explore what other avenues are possible for some of these products like solar panels.
and so you won the prize?
Yeah, we won phase one. I think there are around 30 people who were awarded during phase one. We've applied for phase two, so please keep your fingers crossed for us.
I-
Thank you. And assuming we get phase two, we will apply for phase three as well.
Great. Okay. And so I actually help reuse PV modules because I am the president of NorCal Solar. It's a nonprofit that's been around for 50 years, longer than I've been in the solar industry, of course. And the nonprofit, I get phone calls. Sometimes people are like, what should I do with my old solar modules? And I'm like, I'll take them and I'll use them. And so I am, collecting some old modules and things like that. One thing that I think is really neat is the really old solar modules, like the Arco solar modules. I was at the CALSA dinner that they had in Berkeley a month or two ago, and they gave somebody that was like a state senator an award. And it was this big solar module that they handed to her that she could put on her wall. And I've noticed that a lot of people, they're on their Zoom and things like that, sitting in their office, and they have a bunch of old solar modules behind them and stuff like that. How often do you come across pretty much like antique solar modules? And what do you do with those? Or can I have them?
It varies on where our projects are. In some of the more rural communities like Butte County and in the high desert, we have seen a higher occurrence of the older panels. But whereas some of the more affluent communities like Marin County, Santa Monica, we see more whole system upgrades and the panels themselves are not too old. But that being said, when you kind of look across the landscape, there are some early adoption communities that tend to have, adopted in the 80s, 90s. We look at the average age across all of our projects, the most common year of installation was 2015. So part of our projects, not only do we capture the data on the waste that enters the program, we pull the building permit and find what kind of data we can find there.
Great, great. Yeah, I really love those old modules. So you have like Arco, SolarX, and the other one that I really want to get, which I've never even heard of anybody really seen one in person, is the old 1954 Bell Labs PV module. So if you ever get one of those, can you hold it for me?
We'll call you.
Absolutely. Maybe we should put a call out because I think a lot of times when people just have them on their roof and they're like, well, I don't really want to take it off because I don't know what to do with it, or it's sitting in their garage because the warranty replaced it and or the roofer didn't want to take it, so they left it with them. So we could make this an adventure and a call to find.
Yeah, and I'm sure people like really though for the Bell Labs module, it should be in the Smithsonian or something like that. I'm not sure if there is one because I've actually been in the Smithsonian or some different Smithsonian museums, and I haven't seen a Bell Labs or even heard of anybody that's seen one. But you can see it on these old like history books for solar and stuff. And so they have like the 1954 Bell Labs. It was like the first thing that was a solar module. In fact, they called it a solar battery, although it's not really a battery because it doesn't store energy. And it was the first thing that looked like what we know of as a solar panel or a solar module, just like rectangular with a bunch of crystalline cells in it and stuff like that. So those would be really neat. Another thing that I got a hold of was, I don't know if it was like maybe 8 years ago or something like that. And I was at a NorCal Solar meeting in San Francisco, and I ran into somebody there that had 12 Arco solar modules that he'd have on his rooftop of his house since the 90s, I guess, and making energy. And he was upgrading his system. And he's like, I can't sell it on eBay. And I was like, I'll buy it. And so I think it was like $200 or something for 12 of them. And I think now, like if I tried to sell them, I could easily sell each one for $200. I mean, I wouldn't do it. I've given a couple away for gifts and things like that because they're just so neat. And I'm going to put a couple of them together. I'm going to make a little solar training center and show people how they work. That's one thing that I think that's really neat is showing people how they actually work. I was on a NABCEP exam committee meeting about 15 years ago or something like that. And there's this guy, Ward Bauer. He invented the grid tie inverter at Sandia Labs, and we had the meeting at Sandia Labs. And I was like, where's the oldest PV system here? And he's like, well, it was right there, but we just tore it down. I was like, what did you do that for? That would like really promote how long solar can last and things like that. And it's just amazing to me that people are taking them down after 9 years. And is that mostly residential solar that you're talking about?
Yeah, we've been hosting residential collection events. We've hosted them in Butte County, Santa Monica, and we have an ongoing project in Marin, and it's for residential panels.
Okay.
The reason for that, just a little background, is in the regulatory sphere, residential waste is regulated and funded completely different than commercial waste. So because we're grant funded for these pilot projects through Cal Recycle, through the DOE, we only focus on residentially generated waste. And so those tend to go to your household hazardous waste facility or wherever you waste, like universal waste is the category of electronics. So if a place is qualified to collect e-waste, they can technically collect solar panels. But currently, right now in the state of California, there's only a few counties that have a permanent program to accept solar panels. And they're one of the first product in history that they charge at the gate because they're so expensive to manage. If you bring your panels to an acceptable location, a lot of times they'll make you pay.
They pay you to throw away your perfectly good solar modules that people were paying, up to $10 a watt for, depending on how far you go back, and they're charging you. That seems kind of crazy. Somebody sent me a link to Craigslist last week, and there was a bunch of like 175 watt modules or something, probably like 15 years old, something like that. I emailed him. I was like, oh, I'll get them, but I can't get them till tomorrow. And then somebody else got them. Do you think the people that are doing the reuse, are they mostly like do-it-yourselfers, DIYers? I mean DIY.
It's a mix. We've seen a lot of people using them for off-grid installations. I've talked to people who sold panels to ranchers as an alternative energy source for them. A lot of people who do van life can reutilize those panels, well pumps, carports. Am I missing anything, Joanne? Those are the most common examples that we've seen.
In our pilots, because recycling's so expensive and limited, the reuse network We work with installers. And so because we're focused on residential panels, usually the array coming in is just a few panels. So looking at smaller applications and non-residential dwelling applications is the safest and best market. But that being said, there are some reuse businesses, especially in the Bay Area, and as Livia mentioned in Arizona, who do large scale reuse. So they tend to
Mhm.
work with the utility arrays, but they work also within communities to consolidate and bring shipments. So, for example, Recycle 123 is in the Bay Area. They take e waste and solar panels, they test for reuse and recycling. The panels that are for reuse that he can't sell locally, he'll fill a container and then, ship it to a larger scale reuse partner in Arizona,
Mhm.
Texas. There's some in Georgia.
Yeah, because I would think if people are trying to be good for the environment and all that stuff, they should get extra points for using used solar modules.
You would love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I don't know if they get like their lead points, like lead buildings and all that kind of stuff. There's different types of lead points. I was just thinking too, another thing about that 9 year thing that you're telling me about. I think that would maybe be just for people giving you the modules. Is that what it is?
Yeah, so these are local government waste programs that we run.
Okay.
People who want a convenient end of life solution. So either their installer didn't offer the service. A lot of times, what we're finding is the warranty replaced whatever was broken and then left them with that single, double, whatever panels. So there's a
Okay.
lot of reasons why they're entering our program. But at that point, if they've entered the government waste program, it's because they have no alternative or they just want something more convenient.
Okay. Now maybe I can see why there's that 9 year thing because so much of the solar out there is new because the industry is growing so fast. So there's just not a lot of that right now. Really old stuff out there. And if it is, it's probably still working. And it seems to me that probably a lot of this solar is out there a lot longer. Have you noticed though? I've heard some rumors that as the PV modules are getting larger, and this might be more of a utility scale thing, as the PV modules are getting larger, they're more likely to break because there's like the same thickness of glass and it's a lot bigger and it vibrates and stuff like that. Have you seen that at all?
I can't speak to their likeliness to break, but we have seen because of these pilot projects, just different eras of the panels.
Mm,
And I will say the newer ones are just bigger and generally take two people to load the truck and
mm,
et cetera. Whereas we've seen panels from like the 2000s that were just smaller ones.
yeah.
But right now, the kind of gray area in the law is at what point do they just become e waste, like the camping solar panels
Mm,
or the panels for your battery packs? I mean, in the law, it's 3 inches or larger have to be managed as a panel, or smaller, it's managed as e waste. So, as we see more applications for solar panels, we're going to have to see more differentiation in the recycling programs to accommodate the different sizes and technologies.
And another thing too is I've seen PV modules used for different things like furniture. So you go into some solar companies and they have like solar modules that are desks. I've even seen them being ping pong tables, people hanging them on their walls, all that kind of stuff. So they're not even using them for electricity. That would be something that you could do with some of the non-working ones or just to
Or
keep.
even the working ones.
Mhm.
And those are the people we want to add to our map. Those are the people who are not getting credit for being sustainable businesses because they're artists. They're small scale manufacturers. They're creatives putting panels on fence lines. Those are the people with our American Made Challenge prize we want to uplift. So if anyone's listening and you make those types of products, those are the exact businesses we want to uplift. But the line in the law is as long as the panel is being used to create energy, it's an original intended use. If you're creating a furniture out of a not working panel, the law sees that as an avoidance of safe management.
Hmm.
So it has to stay in its original intended use to be a legal application. But we've seen at Burning Man amazing art installations with used solar panels. And once we've kind of put our feelers out, we've seen amazing installations on carports or well pumps.
Cool. So Burning Man, did you go out there as a business trip?
No, I did go. It was
Uh-huh.
long before I got this job, but at the end of the day, you see a lot of creative self-sustaining uses and applications. And that's one of the first places we really saw the RV applications, like really putting them on the RVs and kind of van life.
I know they have like BlackRock Solar as an organization that I think they use the solar there and then they donate it to schools when it's done. And I used to be a burner back in my earlier days around, before and after 2000, that time. And so it was one of the best times I ever had. So another question that I have too is how toxic do you say solar is? So have you heard of PV cycle? I'm sure you must have. And so they're based out of Europe and they do the PV recycling and they get their stamp on a bunch of modules. And so I was at a conference that's called SNEC in Shanghai, the world's largest solar conference. And I was introducing somebody for like giving a speech. And it was the guy that was in charge of PV cycle. And so after the talk, I talked to him for a little bit and I was like, how toxic is this stuff really? It doesn't seem to me to be very toxic. And he goes, that phone in your pocket, that's way more toxic than this stuff. So even if it all does end in the landfill, it's sort of like a window in a way. What do you tell people how toxic it is? And then we also have to separate out the different technologies. So well over 90% of the PV is crystalline silicon, and crystalline silicon is very, very low on the toxicity scale. I guess if you have enough of it, even water is toxic. You can overdose on water. I haven't tried it. And then we have cadmium telluride, and you probably don't deal with that, I guess. So how toxic would you say the solar is?
Definitively, I think we could say the newer ones tend to be less toxic than hazardous. We like to say
Uh-huh.
hazardous
Yeah.
because you're right, toxicity is a factor of exposure. So ultimately, the answer is we don't know because the labeling's not mandated to include that information. And because the recyclers need to assume it has hazardous components until they know for sure, at the end of the day, solid waste and recycling is one of the top 10 deadliest jobs in the country. So things like reducing exposure risk is really important in protecting the labor pool. So whereas I would say I think they're not too toxic and I think the ability to reclaim those critical materials is a safe process, we don't know. And a lot of the ingredients on these products are not disclosed. So let's say we're using a hot knife to release the glass, you don't know what adhesive is used and you don't know what fumes are coming off from applying that heat. So, whereas the actual materials might not be toxic in their exposure, the disassembly and management could arise to other risks of exposure.
Yeah, I mean, even if you took a hot knife to your milk container that's made out of plastic, I would say that that vaporizing plastic is toxic or, it's not healthy. I wouldn't want to be breathing that. And so you do have things that are like plastic, the back sheet of the PV module. And from what I know is like you took your average crystalline silicon solar module, there might be a little bit of lead in there in the solder, but not a whole lot. There's lead in the solder and everything you're dealing with every day, and it's not a whole lot. And the thing to be careful of are cadmium telluride PV modules, and they're completely different than crystalline silicon, and they're really easy to tell, like if you just look at them. So if you see solar cells that are like, usually these days, they're like kind of rounded corners, and maybe they're cut in half cells, things like that. But if you see like 100 thin stripes going across a PV module, or not exactly 100, but something like that, you might be looking at cadmium telluride, and then that's one where you don't want to touch it. And so it is toxic. If you touch it, it's okay, but you don't want to like get it over 1,000 degrees Celsius or anything like that. And those PV modules are supposed to be tracked typically by the company that manufactures them, First Solar, and they can actually very easily recycle them and turn them right back into solar modules. And also the cadmium, which is a toxic heavy metal, is a byproduct of copper mining. So they have to do something with it anyway, because they're mining for copper. So why not turn it into solar modules? So it's not really a bad thing, but that's not something you want to be melting with a hot knife or anything like that. But with your regular crystalline silicon solar modules, they're just not very toxic. And then there are some different technologies and things out there. So Perovskites, it's always hard to pronounce that, but they do have typically like a little bit of a lead in them. I don't think it's like a huge amount. It's not like your car battery or anything like that. I'm not sure if somebody was telling me recently that it would be like car battery would make you like megawatts of this stuff, like if that much lead. So I don't think it's very toxic. And so you can look at anything, even like the windows on your house and the caulking in there. There's probably something in there that you could say it's toxic. Food containers, toxic, all that kind of stuff. So I think in some ways people get overly concerned about the toxicity of a solar module. However, it is really good to recycle them. We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSean, that's Solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show. And so I have another question for you too. For like recycling solar modules, so like you take this crystalline silicon and all that kind of stuff and the glass and the frames and all that, and there's all kinds of YouTube videos showing you what they're doing with that. They like separate things out, crush them up, and do different chemical processes to them. And so is it more energy intensive to take solar module and recycle it and refine silicon out of that, or just to refine silicon from scratch, like from quartzite or something like that? Just like the rocks, like silicon, second most abundant element in the Earth's crust. So it's definitely not hard to get. So do you have any data on that?
I mean, if you look across all the critical materials going into the panels, I mean, ultimately our goal is to just reduce our reliance on mining new materials and importing. There are other environmental and social impacts that are externalized from a lot of those GHG calculations. So I think a lot of products are kind of dealing with that same question. It's still a lot cheaper to use virgin oil than to use recycled polyester or recycled plastic. But ultimately, our goal is to reduce the reliance on naturally derived fossil fuels, on critical material mining, and the unfair burden on the communities that are processing those materials. So cheaper, maybe, energy intensive, maybe, but if you really look at the holistic, inclusive life cycle assessment, recycling, even in its nascency, is the better way to go long term.
Yeah. Yeah. Like sometimes you see people that are just like against solar, like they're against renewables. They're just like, drill baby drill and all that kind of stuff. And you hear them say things like, oh, these solar people, they're ruining the environment and they're going to fill up all the landfills and it takes more energy to make a solar module than it'll ever make. And all these things are complete lies. They're not the truth or anything like that, but they get kind of spread around and the internet in different circles and things like that. And there's a good number of people who believe that stuff. And so I just kind of like to get the point out there that like if you kind of look at all the solar waste compared to like the waste from other things, it's like a grain of sand compared to the beach or something like that. Coal waste and landfill and other types of e-waste. And there's just so many different types of waste that the solar is just like a very, very small part of it. Plus we're like not putting all that other waste into the air.
And we haven't gotten to the point of single waste or single use solar panels. Like we have single use plastic and single use clothing. We have single use electronics. We haven't gotten to that point of societal, situation where we have single use solar panels, at least that I know of. So there's a lot of other things helping the situation with solar panel and being a less problematic waste stream. High value, high durability, but ultimately they're hard to manage. They're heavy, they're hard to identify its reuse potential or where to take them. So if you look at who funds CPSC and in our network of local government waste authorities, I mean, solar panels have been deemed one of the hardest to manage products for over 5 years in our regular surveys. So whereas it might not be a problem for the general public and it might not be a problem volume wise when you compare it to other product categories, as its own product category, it's actually considered one of the hardest to manage, especially for our local government who are having to bear the cost to research the problem, to create a program for collection, and to establish contracts with reputable recyclers. And in doing so, they don't have the time to test for reuse. So that's why as CPSC moves forward with our reuse pilots and recycling pilots, our ultimate goal is to create a permanent program and to sponsor legislation on solar panel recycling in California.
Great. So I know you're in Sacramento. So are you involved politically there, doing legislation and all that stuff?
CPSC was the sponsor of AB2 and AB1238 last legislative session. Those were proposals to add solar panels to California's e-waste program. Some of our issues, so actually it was a bifurcated approach. So the residential panels would have gone to the e-waste program and the utility scale would have been managed under what's called extended producer responsibility. You mentioned it in theory earlier, tracking its lifespan and taking it back by the manufacturers. That's a type of law that's called extended producer responsibility. So last year, the laws didn't pass, but in our negotiations with SEIA, CALSA, and other major industry organizations, we're hoping to find a better path forward. So a CPSC will be introducing legislation with Assemblymember Ward this year. Technically, it starts in December, but most likely we see all the bills introduced in January. So keep your eyes out, keep your ears out, because we do intend to introduce extended producer responsibility legislation for solar panels.
Great, great. So one of the things I was just thinking of too is a lot of people listening are people that are in the solar industry that have skills, that know how to install solar and things like that. And I would like to encourage those people to reuse and to use solar PV, like instead of getting the expensive stuff and putting it on your south roof, get the free stuff and put it on north, south, east, and west. Like I've done that. That's what I do myself too. And so since people are actually paying money to recycle the PV, like to drop it off, stuff like that, is there a way that people can just get it for free?
Yeah, that's one of the goals of our map is to really connect markets with generators so that the government actually doesn't have to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
So we can add anyone to the map who wants to receive panels, and we can add details like how far you're willing to drive to pick them up. And then ultimately, we would love to see a network of reuse businesses throughout the state. So it's convenient. So no one has to really drive more than 5, 10 miles, maybe 20 miles to actually get connected with a reuse partner.
Okay, that's
So if any
awesome.
of the installers that are listening, that's who we really think is the key to success for a future program is the installers. They're the ones trained on the product types. They're the ones doing the installation and communicating with the resident. And so we feel like a permanent program should really incentivize financially the installers, pay them to pick them up and pay them to drop them off at reuse partners and designated collection sites. And so when we develop permanent recycling programs, we think about the established infrastructure first and how we can divert funding into uplifting the existing infrastructure.
I kind of have an idea too that there should be some solar companies out there, instead of advertising that they have the latest, that they have free solar modules that are recycled. And how much better for the environment can you be than to be recycling renewable energy? So
I
people
love
should be
it.
putting that on their websites and selling that instead
And
of,
we can use our grant funds to promote them if they do, because that's exactly the shift of behavior change and the shift of business models that we would love to see.
yeah. Yeah. And I think it could be an option. Like they could still sell the ones that you have to pay for and stuff like that. But how about installing the recycled PV? It just seems like a really good idea. What about other things too besides PV? Do you get your hands on inverters and things like that? So some of the donated systems that I've had, they come with inverters.
So because we use grants, we have really strict rules on what we can accept. And so for the pilot projects that are funded by Cal Recycle, we only accept the panels. The inverters can go into the e-waste program. So typically, if we accept them or if they end up in our collection, we just hand them over to the county's e-waste program. But yes, in theory, we see them, but because the way the rules are written, we can't always accept them.
Maybe you could make something like a dating app for inverters, and then you go like, "Oh, I like that one," and you swipe whatever direction, you're supposed to.
I love that.
Because I mean, there's probably a ton of inverters that are just going in the trash that work perfectly fine. And one of the things that I like too about getting these donated systems is they come with the rails, the inverters, the PV, so you know that they already work together. They're already sized to work together. So that would be a kind of a cool thing. Like when you pick it up, go like, "Oh, do you have an inverter?" Well, we can't take the inverter, but can we put you in the database and somebody might give you a call?
I love that. There's another American Made Challenge REX winner in the Bay Area, and they take used EV batteries, so from the electric cars,
Hmm.
they take the batteries and put them in like a bigger, like 40-foot container. So they make huge batteries units from used EV batteries.
Great.
So we linked up with them because we thought one of the ways we can win the next phase is if we take a used EV battery and a used panel and we can create microgrids. So because their use of the application is so big, we weren't able to do any prototypes. But if we win phase two, we're hoping for them to take basically it'll be like the size of a computer tower.
Uh-huh.
Used EV battery, you can have some
Uh-huh.
safety precautions for the inverter and the energy flow. And then we're giving panels out for free. So if
Hmm.
anyone really wants panels for free, they can contact us. But we typically push them to our reuse partners. We're really just the nonprofit trying to connect generators with end markets. So if you're in the Bay Area, we have quite a few reuse partners that, if they come from our pilot, you can access them for free.
One thing that I've kind of joked about over the years is like, man, PV is getting so inexpensive. Pretty soon they're going to pay you to take them. And it's sort of like they're paying you to take them right now. So we're there. It's like negative pricing.
And ultimately, I mean, what we see through and through for every product type is the people who are generating the waste, they just want something convenient. Like they only want to
Mhm.
make one call or they only want to, drive a little bit to drop it off or have someone pick it up. So we design these programs to be as convenient as possible. And in doing that, yeah, it has to be free or low cost because the moment you start asking for more money, you're going to get illegal dumping, mismanagement.
Mhm.
And so that's why CPSC tends to promote the recycling programs that have advanced recycling fees. So the recycling is prepaid when the product enters the market.
Okay. And what is the recycling fee? How did they calculate that?
Well, we haven't passed the law yet, funny enough. But ultimately, when you look at other products that are regulated under extended producer responsibility, the industry sets the fee. And that's one of the whole theories of this type of recycling program is the government's not the one designing the program or running the program. It's an industry designed and run program. So extended producer responsibility ultimately puts the industry in the driver's seat and says, you tell us, how should we manage these products? What's it going to cost? How do we get the infrastructure and stakeholders engaged?
So are you talking about like a fee that you pay when you buy the solar?
The way the bill was written last year, it would have been a consumer fee.
So does that mean like for when the people buy soda bottles, they have to pay an extra 5 cents or whatever or something?
Kind of, but that's a deposit. I would compare it more to like when you buy a computer screen or when you buy a certain electronics, that's the e-waste program. You don't get the money back and the money goes towards, the infrastructure.
Okay. See, I don't think most people even pay attention to that. They're just like, this is how much I pay for this computer screen. They don't go like, oh, which part is the e-waste fee? Like most
Mhm.
people don't pay attention to that. So,
A lot of times they might be participating in an extended producer responsibility program and have no idea. Here in
mhm.
California, our mattress program is an EPR program. Our paint program is like an EPR program. And so a lot of times when you think about who's paying that fee, under EPR, the industry pays it on behalf of their customers so that it remains free for the customers to encourage participation.
How about Christmas trees?
Christmas trees, if they've been treated with hazardous chemicals, cannot get composted. So maybe there does need to be a
Uh-huh.
fee.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, even like I know like they come and they pick them up at your house and it's just like part of your garbage service. I'm not sure where the money comes from to do all that.
It comes from your garbage bill. So
Hmm.
right now, garbage, solid waste and recycling programs are not funded from the general fund. It's a fee that's by your garbage bill. That's why no matter who is running your city, no matter what politics are happening, your garbage program's safe because it's actually funded by a fee in your garbage bill. So even if you live in an apartment, whoever owns that apartment's paying that bill.
Hmm.
So if we add more products, so you want to put your solar panels out to your curb, that's going to cost the city more. You want to start putting your refrigerators out, it costs the city more. So the whole theory and why the cities and counties fund CPSC is we want more programs, but we don't want to raise everyone's bill.
Okay, great, great. Okay, so what should everybody do now?
Follow CPSC to get engaged in our pilot projects, to add yourself to our map, and ultimately to endorse and engage with the legislation. The reason EPR is so successful as a management style is because everyone is welcome to the table and everyone has an opportunity to put their input in the legislative process. So we have an open door policy. Whether you're part of an association or not, we encourage you to contact us directly. We can explain how the legislation will work and we can explain how to get involved, because the more people at the table, the better the outcome will be.
So the CPSC, the California Product Stewardship Council, do you do other stuff besides solar PV?
We do. We actually work on all the products that are deemed hard to manage. So we work on things like textiles, propane cylinders. We passed the big EPR bill in 2022 on batteries. We've also done really big things specifically on getting reuse and getting the local government set up for permanent programs. So I'll hand it over to Livia so she can give a quick thank you to some of our local government partners and explain how to get involved if you live in those jurisdictions with active pilots.
Great.
So, in addition to our ongoing work funded by the Department of Energy through the REX Prize, we're currently working with Zero Waste Marin in Marin County. We're hosting free solar panel collection there through the end of January, and we will accept panels from installers and homeowners as long as they are residential solar panels. We will collect them and either recycle them or find free reuse opportunities for residents there. And we would love to thank Zero Waste Marin for all of their incredible work that they've done. They've been a really wonderful partner in this project, and we're thrilled with how well the pilot has gone. You can email us at info@calpsc.org. And we also have an open survey. So if you have solar panels for collection, you can fill out our survey. We can maybe link that at the end of the episode, and we will come pick up your panels for you.
Great, great. And so you guys just come and pick them up. You make an appointment and you come and pick them up. Do
Yep.
people sometimes go like, oh, they're on the roof, you got to get them down?
Unfortunately, we can't deinstall, so we do ask that they're off the roof at the time of pickup, but we've had our folks go up crazy hills, go into your garage, we'll pick them up from your backyard. If you just tell us where they are, we'll come take them off your hands.
And then do you see sometimes that before you get them, somebody else gets to them?
Yes, that happened once. We had a very busy week. I did not respond to an email, and I was told the panels had been taken care of with no clarification on what that meant. So I hope they're in a safe place.
Maybe I have them.
Maybe you have them. Who knows?
We've also had other examples where they'll put a whole pallet at the end of the driveway and say there's 10 panels. And when we go to pick them up, there's 8 or 7 because, either neighbors picked them out. But if it's getting reused and it has a safe place to go at the end of the day, we're pretty happy that people are excited and thirsty for free panels.
And I saw that you have some reuse workshops.
We had our inaugural one in Marin County, and that's where we really focus on the different stakeholders who are trying to really promote reuse. So a big audience that we had were installers in the area and cleaning, deinstallation. We had students, international students and graduate students who are designing solar systems, especially internationally. And then lastly, we had a lot of local government who are just saying, like, how can we create a program that again, supports local installers. So our next reuse training will be in Southern California. We haven't set a date or a location because we're still looking for partners. Currently, we're working closely with Santa Barbara County and with the San Bernardino High Desert. But if anyone listening is interested in hosting a reuse training, we can show up for free. We show up, we bring the instructors, we help promote and get the students involved. And our goal, especially if we get this phase 2 funding, is to actually implement these trainings all over the state.
Great, great. Well, this is super awesome. Thank you so much for all this great information. Is there anything else that you want to cover?
Well, thank you so much for inviting us and for sharing your platform. At the end of the day, the more audience we can capture to let them know, what the state of California is trying to do to push the envelope and to really push circularity and sustainability. Thank you for hosting us, and thank you for your audience for listening.
Thank you so much, Joanne Brasch, and thank you, Livia Keene. And thanks for listening to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast, where you can find out everything you need to know about solar and storage and recycling. And you could take classes, and you could get yourself NABCEP certified, and you could learn how to install these recycled PV modules so you don't have to pay for PV. Free PV, everyone. Woo!